Welcome to Concrete Block, the podcast where we dive into the latest news and current events shaping our world. I'm your host, Walter, and we're glad you're joining us today. We're starting off with a complex and sensitive topic that's been making headlines around the globe. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has escalated in recent days, with Israeli strikes on Gaza City resulting in significant loss of life. According to health officials, at least 14 people were killed overnight in Gaza City, as Israel ramps up its offensive and urges Palestinians to leave. This development comes as Western countries, including France, the UK, Australia, and Canada, are considering recognizing Palestinian statehood. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced plans to formalize his country's decision to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly this week. However, Macron has also stated that the release of hostages held by Hamas is a requirement before France would open an embassy in a Palestinian state. The situation on the ground is dire, with tens of thousands of Palestinians affected by the conflict and humanitarian aid in short supply. The international community is calling for a ceasefire and a negotiated solution to the crisis. U.S. President Trump has expressed concerns about the situation, but his administration's stance on the conflict remains unclear. It's essential to approach this topic with nuance and understanding, recognizing the deep-seated complexities and historical context that underpin the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We'll continue to monitor developments and provide updates as more information becomes available. We strive to bring you balanced and unbiased reporting, acknowledging the perspectives and concerns of all parties involved. As we navigate this complex issue, we encourage our listeners to engage in respectful and informed discussions. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're diving into the second segment of today's show, where we'll explore some of the most pressing stories making headlines around the world. From international diplomacy to presidential power plays, we've got it all covered. First off, let's take a look at the latest developments in U.S.-China relations. A bipartisan group of lawmakers has just returned from a visit to China, where they met with high-ranking officials to discuss trade and security issues. Meanwhile, a delegation of American business leaders is set to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping to explore new investment opportunities. But that's not all. We're also seeing some significant moves on the diplomatic front. A group of U.S. lawmakers has just introduced a new bill aimed at promoting greater cooperation between the U.S. and China on issues like climate change and nuclear non-proliferation. It's a fascinating development and one that could have major implications for global politics. Speaking of presidential power, we're also seeing some interesting stories emerging from the White House. President Trump has been facing criticism for his use of executive authority, with some accusing him of overstepping his bounds. Senator Chris Murphy has been particularly vocal on this issue, arguing that the president is using his powers to silence critics and punish political opponents. It's a complex and nuanced debate, and one that raises important questions about the role of the presidency in American democracy. We'll be keeping a close eye on this story as it develops and exploring the implications for the country and the world. In other news, the Taliban has responded to President Trump's suggestion that the U.S. could reopen its military base in Afghanistan. The group's leaders have rejected the idea, citing concerns about sovereignty and national security. It's a delicate situation, and one that requires careful diplomacy and negotiation. Finally, we're seeing some significant developments on the international stage, with reports of a major breakthrough in negotiations between the U.S. and North Korea. It's still early days, but this could be a major step forward for global peace and security. That's all for now. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Concrete Block. Good evening, and welcome back to the Concrete Block. I'm your host, Walter. As we wrap up today's show, we turn our attention to a developing story that's been making headlines around the world. The conflict in the Middle East has escalated, with Israel urging Palestinians remaining in Gaza City to leave as it ramps up its offensive. According to reports from CBS News, Israel has warned those still in Gaza City to evacuate, but the cost of transportation can be prohibitively expensive, running into thousands of dollars. This warning comes as world leaders prepare to meet in New York for the United Nations General Assembly, where the war in the Middle East is expected to be a top priority. We've also been following a related story from the BBC, which highlights the plight of Palestinian students who have been evacuated from Gaza to study in the UK. While some have been able to take up their places at British universities, many are facing the difficult decision of leaving their families behind. The UK government has imposed restrictions on international students bringing their dependents with them, and PhD students are now the only exception. Manar al-Hubi, a Palestinian student who has been offered a place at Glasgow University, told the BBC that she cannot bear the thought of being separated from her 3 young children and husband. "We are a family, we are one unit, we cannot be separated," she said. Her story is just one example of the human cost of this conflict, which has already claimed thousands of lives. As we report on these developments, it's essential to remember that the situation in the Middle East is complex and multifaceted. We strive to bring you balanced and unbiased coverage, acknowledging the perspectives and concerns of all parties involved. In conclusion, the conflict in the Middle East continues to unfold, with far-reaching consequences for individuals, families, and communities. As we go to air, the international community is urging restraint and a peaceful resolution to the crisis. That's all for today's Concrete Block. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, stay informed.